Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Data Conclave. Thank you so much for tuning into day two, where our esteemed panel will unpack opportunities and challenges in accessing last mile consumer mindsets. Before we start, a little bit about the Data Conclave. This is an idea that's been brewing in our minds at Sambodhi for the longest time now. Having worked with evidence for almost close to 2 decades, we've observed firsthand how data and technology are rapidly taking over how we think and act in our development landscape. As we undergo this shift, both as an organization and as part of a larger development ecosystem, the need to locate how best this data explosion can serve our social impact goals is now bigger than ever. As data actively reconfigures our pathways to development, it's imperative that we work in tandem with multi sector partners without losing sight of this larger objective. The Data Conclave is a step in that direction. Our goal is to foster conversations and build a strong narrative by bringing together leaders at the forefront of data and technology for inclusive and effective impact. With that, I'd like to invite Vikas Chaudhary, Vice President, Public Health Practice at Sambodhi, to share a few words to set the context for today's discussion. Vikas, over to you.
Thank you, Camilla. I hope everybody can hear me. Great. So, good evening, everybody, and I'm really excited for today's plenary on the title "Opportunities and Challenges in Unpacking Last Mile Consumer Mindsets." So, Camilla introduced me as Vice President Public Health Practice, and I like to believe I'm a storyteller. So, I have a small story to start and set the context for this thing. I come from a land of medicine, health. And as any story starts, it's a once upon a time story when I used to sit in the clinic looking at patients, looking at trying to hear out their symptoms and give my medicines, and then just shutting down thinking, oh, these people are going to take the medicines that I'm going to give them and they're going to go back, exactly do the behaviors that I've thought they would do. And their thing's going to go away. Well, you know what happens to that. I mean, it fell really flat on me. These people kept coming back to me, and I kept thinking, what is it in my medical training that I have yet to think about and unravel in a certain way? There starts my second part of the story. I decided, oh, now I'm going to get into public health and understand about public health. I'm going to look at community behaviors, and I started my training in public health research and started trained myself to be a social epidemiologist. I'm still trying to unravel what social epidemiology means, but that was what I thought I would now do. What changed? Rather than individual patients coming, I thought I'm going to change population behaviors. Guess where that story goes again, falling flat, because all in the development sector, and I think I can say personally about myself, but I'm pretty much certain that a lot of my colleagues at Sambodhi also think the same, that we generally tend to look at data from a very administrative lens. It's not a data, means while we do have certain times the data around populations and their behaviors, I think it's very few and far between. The first thing when Sambodhi and me decided that I'm going to do a little bit of context setting for this plenary, I just Googled unraveling consumer last mile consumer mindsets in Google, and you know what comes up. It's kind of very interesting. The things that came up on was from the retail sector, and it was focused on consumer needs, optimize fulfillment locations to lower delivery cost, enable consumer centric fulfillment offerings. Do we do that in the development sector? I don't think we even reach the last mile. I just think all our population health, at least for the public health people, everything is about coverage of your interventions, availability of interventions, health system strengthening, etc., etc. Nothing about what happens what happens with the consumer mindset. And why do people do what they do, or why don't people don't do what they do? So I'm really excited to see how some of the esteemed panelists on this have actually gone ahead and tried to use certain innovative methodologies, all in bigger surveys. And in the development sectors, we've used in terms of behaviors are large scale data sets or some qualitative research where rather than unraveling the mindsets, all we are fighting is about, oh, what's the methodology of this? Oh, what was the sample size of it? Oh, what happened here? Like, very traditional mindsets, very traditional data sets, very traditional ways of looking at data. And like, it's pretty interesting. Yesterday's panel was on data ecosystems, right? And it kept started I started thinking that data ecosystems, the main stakeholder in the data ecosystem is the person whose data we are collecting or who we are using or trying to do that. Often missing, often their behaviors missing, often the things that often the things that they do or don't do or why they don't do, missing from the thing. Even within the private sector, I do understand there's a lot of consumer behavior methodologies that are used, but even in the private sector, are these or are these consumers actually the ones, or whatever, like research participants, we can call them different names. Are we actually being inclusive on everybody? Are we just like, targeting even the people who are most vulnerable? What about the intersectionalities of vulnerability? I think those are questions that even, forget like dev sectors not even reach there, but even the private sector has still yet to I feel that's my personal view, that they still yet have to reach out for. So very warm welcome to all the panelists. Extremely excited. I know that COVID hit us and we were like, forced into this technology and trying to start up thinking we're starting new methodologies. It is completely a beaten drum to say, oh, COVID hit, so we are like using these new methodologies. But I do genuinely think that it has been an opportunity to leverage some of these methodologies. How are we going to use that to unravel the last mile consumer? Or for me, it is the community, the family, or the individual woman that I want to reach out for, is something I'm going to look forward to in this panel. A warm, warm welcome. And I'm all ears to learn from all the panelists and then hopefully use that in the Sambodhi's methodology at some point in time. And I'm hoping the data ecosystems allow us to use those methodologies also. Thank you all. And over to you, Camilla. All ears to the panel.
Thanks so much, Vikas. That was really helpful. I resonated a lot with what you said about putting consumers at the center of everything we do, because they are the last mile that we want to focus on in all of our research efforts as well. I'd like to now introduce our speakers for today's session. The way I'll go about this is first introduce them and then request them to take a minute to share a little bit more about their work and areas of interest. First up, we have Kanika Kumar, Senior Design and Strategy Lead at IDEO. She leads strategy and partnerships at IDEO Collab's Last Mile Money Initiative, a global innovation portfolio to connect underserved communities to the digital economy. Prior to that, she worked at IntelliCap, where she advised institutions on inclusive business and impact investing strategies. Kanika, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela, and everyone for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. I've spent my entire career working with people at the last mile and trying to design products and services that fit into their everyday lives. And as Vikas pointed out, I think every data point is a person. And so never forgetting that ultimately we're talking about people here, and ultimately we're designing or building solutions for them is really my passion and my interest. And so I'm excited to share how we do that through design thinking at IDEO with you all.
Great. Thanks so much, Kanika. Really looking forward. Next, we have Chandana Banerjee, Senior Vice President at Carvey Insights. She has 20 years of experience conducting research studies across automotive, FMCG, retail finance, as well as the social sector. Prior to Carvey, she worked with IMRB, Nielsen, Ipsos, and boutique companies like Absolute Data. Chandana, we're so glad that you're here with us. Please go ahead. The next minute is yours.
Thank you, Camilla. And a warm good evening to everybody here. I'm really, really very happy to be a part of this conclave today and looking forward to learning a lot from each of you. As you have, from what Camilla has said, as you've understood, I mean, my background is not necessarily, developmental sector and social research, though I have done some bits there. But primarily, I come from the other part of it, which is what I guess Vikas was referring to when he said, the private sector. So yes, a lot of work. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to do quite a bit of work across different types of consumers to elicit data from them and therefore make sense out of it. And in fact, honestly, interacting with different kinds of consumers and making sense of the data, whether it is quantitatively or otherwise, is my passion. And now with changing times and with other imperatives coming in, the new methodologies also that one is thinking about using, coming up, veering towards it, very innovative and otherwise tried and tested, and even new ones are the ones that are sort of, defining the research age today in terms of eliciting information. And that is what a little bit of that I'll be trying to sort of, talk about today in the talk. And I'll be glad to answer any questions, any other alternate thoughts if anybody has. Thank you so much. Yeah, over to you, Camilla.
Thanks so much, Chandana. Finally, we have Manoj Singh, who leads the mandate for crop residue management at the Nature Conservancy. He leads the Regenerative Agriculture Strategy Portfolio and Crop Residue Management Initiative at TNC. Manoj has over 20 years of experience in various subsectors of agriculture, including inclusive agricultural value chains and community based adaptation and mitigation systems. Manoj, please go ahead.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you, Sambodhi, for offering this opportunity to be a part of this data conclave. So basically, almost in the agri sector for the last 2 decades and working almost throughout the country, working with farmers and all. And to be very frank, really a lot of things that we can, share and, exchange learnings. And what I'll be talking about was basically about my recent experience with, right now I'm part of the Nature Conservancy, which is one of the largest conservation organization of the world. I'll be talking about the recent issue that is going on, crop residue burning in Northwest India, how we are trying to monitor some of the things through technology, remote sensing and all, and what we have learned from it. So that's one example, but I'll be happy to discuss more about it and other part of it also, because farmers is something that is very close to my heart. I would like to work continuously on this sector, because everyone knows about India is an agrarian country and a lot of people are dependent on agriculture. So thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Manoj. Our session today is moderated by Sandeep Ghosh, who leads the Development Intelligence Unit, or DIU, launched by Sambodhi and Transform Rural India Foundation and funded by the Gates Foundation. Sandeep has 30 years of experience in the research consulting industry. Prior to DIU, Sambodhi has held leadership positions at BBC Media Action, Ipsos, Carvey Insights, TNS India, and Nielsen. Sandeep, over to you.
Thanks, Camilla, and welcome all. I sincerely hope that you giving 1.5 hours of your time, you'll at least feel that it was worth it, because I certainly am extremely excited with the speakers here. I'm going to change the format a little bit in terms of I want Manoj to be the first speaker, then I want Kanika to follow him, and finally with Chandana. And if we have some time which is left, I'd like to talk about what we are doing at some of the panels. The way we are going to do is that each speaker is going to speak for about 10 minutes, which is their core presentation. Some of them might not. And then we will leave it to the floor for about 5 minutes for some question and answers. I will certainly be having some of the questions, not only because I am rather inquisitive, but the fact remains that, I sort of have some idea of what they're going to present. But please don't worry if your question is not addressed in those 5 minutes, because there will be time at the end of the session to ask more questions. We are not raising hands or butting into each other trying to ask questions. Please use the chat board and type in your questions, and we will try and get to as many of them as possible during the course of the session. So if I might invite Manoj to open.
Sure. Thanks, Sandeep. Once again, thank you very much. And I like to share a few thoughts, some of my thoughts that, gone are the days when we were doing the traditional method of, monitoring, evaluation, learning, waiting for results for the end line, and then doing the corrective course action. We all know that, for example, in the social sector, the corporate social responsibility, it's only for 1 year. How we can effectively make use of such, grants and, money for the social cause, which makes an impact, is something that is of interest to everyone. And there, the technology plays a very important role in reducing the time between, capturing the data and then drawing inferences out of it, and then reaching to the last mile consumer to inform and take a proper, decision on it. So as suggested, I'll go for one example. I'd like to share right now. I'm working on one crop residue burning issue. Everyone knows in Northwest India, especially Delhi, NCR, the pollution levels goes high, especially in the month of October, November. And one of the reason is because of crop residue burning that is being there in states like Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. And though there are many questions, everyone is talking about how much this crop residue burning attributes to the pollution part of it. But what we are focusing on the solution part. Pollution part you can see, you can capture also, but what we will be focusing is on how we can reduce that part of it, in terms of reaching to the last mile consumer for us, which is a farmer, how we can make a shift in their behavioral change aspect through taking appropriate decision making based upon technological intervention. So what we have done, I just want to share this problem is a huge problem, and it's basically, it covers almost 1.5 million hectares area in a span of around 3 weeks, and then maybe involving more than 2 million farmers also. So it's not that everyone is burning, but yes, monitoring and getting those data sets and everything is really a key challenge, especially during those 3 weeks. And whenever you try to monitor these things and you ask farmers that whether you have burned the crop last year, somebody will say yes, I have burned. Somebody will say no, I haven't burned. But you will listen, majority of them will say no, we haven't burned. But if you see the fire events and everything from the remote sensing, it's not changing at all. From 2017 and now in 2021, it's more or less, it's near to those the fire events. So what we have tried to do here is basically we try to capture some fire events data at village level for the last 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. And what we are trying to see the trend part of it, that which villages are going in terms of reduction in crop residue burning, and which villages are where there is a continuous increase in crop residue burning for the last 4 years. And we are also trying to validate those things from the ground, and then trying to understand which are the sites of learning. Sites of learning in the sense that those villages where there's a drastic reduction in fire events in last 4 years, and then trying to understand what works there and then why it works there. For example, in some areas, it may be because of some panchayat head who is taking a proactive role. In some area, there might be access to crop residue management machines that are available in that region. In some areas, probably the service providers are more, and then areas where there's not a decline at all, we are also trying to map out those things and then taking an informed decision, so that anyone who want to move ahead in terms of crop residue burning, it's not that everyone will work on this all the villages of Punjab, Haryana like states, but take an informed decision that where they would like to work, so that in the area where there are very high burning areas or medium burning areas, or learning from the sites of learning also. And one of the key learning that we got is data is really important here. And there are different data sets. One is from NASA that is publicly available. Then we need to see where we can get the boundaries, village level maps and all those things, and trying to see the census data also. And then from the census data, we are trying to understand, for example, in some areas where the literacy rate is low, is there any correlation between the fire events versus the literacy rate? Is there any correlation between the fire events versus availability of specific variety? And then there are multiple of parameters and factors that are there. But yes, in terms of barrier and challenges, one of the key challenges getting a uniform data sets all across. We need to fetch data from census data or from any other organization. That uniformity and then data sharing thing also, that is very critical here. And we know there are a lot of organizations who are working on it, but unless we work together towards a common cause, it will be difficult to address the problems like whether it is a crop residue burning or any other problem. Unless there's a common vision for it, multi-stakeholder approach towards it, it's very difficult. And when I say crop residue burning, there are root causes behind that. It's not that farmers are, because of their interest, they are doing it. We need to address those root causes. So this is how we have tried to use the remote sensing techniques, and also try to understand from farmers' response that how they have done even reduction in terms of crop residue management, and how the factors that are causing when there's a no decline in crop residue burning. So these are some of the things I just want to highlight, and I'll be happy to share any critical thing that anyone would like to know, or further, other details of it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Manoj. I see people have not yet started typing in, but I'm pretty sure they will. But I have a question which I wanted to ask you. And you talked about remote sensing. Give us some idea of some of the other techniques that that you, as an and your organization, use to get at the last mile connectivity, and possibly some enabling factors and some barriers towards actually using these methods successfully.
This is a sort of monitoring part of it, or you can say from the perspective of to understand the ground realities and taking an informed decision. But I'll share one example of concurrent monitoring, how we have done that. And then we can't wait for 6 months or 7 months, because nowadays the project timelines are very short. As I said earlier, the CSR thing, it's only for 1 year, and then we need to understand all those things. So we have done one online, you can say, crop residue management advisory services we provided to farmers through mobile based advisories, with the support of our partners who are into mobile based and other thing. What we have done is basically we shared those advisories to the farmer, but it's not a one-sided thing that we are just sharing the information and we are not monitoring what is happening on the ground. So what we have done, every week or almost every fortnight, we are trying to reach out to some of the farmers as sample size, and trying to understand that in terms of our messages and all, is it all at all relevant, or is it in terms of their priorities, the timings are fine with them in terms of receiving those messages, or anything they feel like that this is not of much important message for them, but if anything on, for example, pest management or anything on availability of machine, that is more important. Then accordingly we change our strategy in terms of dissemination of messages within a short span of time, in a next 1 month or next quarter. Otherwise what happens in traditional techniques, you go for midline and then trying to take, you lose time. So that is where we need to save time. And probably like COVID was there, and then it was difficult to reach out to the farmers and all, and there we got a critical success of this online mobile based advisory system, where we shared these advisory and even got critical feedback from the farmers. Not only in this project, I remember in 2007 there was another project with one agency where we have used, Cisco certified Cisco systems, and then trying to do all those farmers advisory through in Madhya Pradesh, Bundelkhand region. And then we saw the results also. There was drastic impact in terms of productivity improvement, income enhancement. So you can see the results of those, practices within the duration of the project, maybe towards the midline and all. So this is another example.
We have, I hope we have time for him to take one more question, because is that all right? Because I think Abhishek has a very pertinent question here. He says, could you mention a few interventions or programs in the agricultural space that are using sensors, to identify underlying patterns and make course corrections based on evidence?
Right.
And also, are there what are the key challenges in gathering such data and using them over time for analysis?
Right. So yeah, it's a very relevant question. I think first of all, I'm not an expert on remote sensing, but yes, I have seen all those things that is going on all across India. Right now, for example, I'll give you one example, that crop insurance, for example, uh, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana and all. There are a lot of corporates that has been involved in that program, who are providing remote sensing based, technologies, and they are trying to do the testing and, in terms of pilots, and then trying to take a, corrective action, or in terms of, disbursement to the farmers and all. But at pan India level, it's not right now. It has covered the entire India. It may be in few states where, the key challenge, one of the key challenge, I feel that agriculture is a state subject. So you'll let a difference in the states as well as, in the center is proactive. Sometimes states are also proactive, but their priorities may be different. So those are some critical challenge. And other challenges is also access to these, like every state is like a country for us, so much of variation. Then, if you want to put sensors also, you need to see the microclimate of a farm fields is so different. It's a huge difference of variation is there in terms of field and all. So those are some critical challenges, I think, in terms of data sets. I think that's why there's a need for, a platform where, everyone can come together and try to share their learnings and try to understand these data sets and how we can use them for the benefit of all.
Is there longitudinal data to understand the geographic distribution patterns of the fire? Right? And are there new areas coming under fire, or if there is anything new areas coming within it?
Yes, there are longitudinal data that is available. You can get these data sets from 2012 till 2021. But yeah, the resolution of, capturing those fire events differs. Somewhere it is even up to 10-meter resolution. Somewhere it is 375 by 375 meter resolution. So it varies with that. We have done few analysis, as I said, from 17 to 21 for all the districts of Punjab and Haryana. We are working on it. We are trying to understand, and we want to make a ground truthing before we, share any critical learnings. What the target for us is, before this season starts for crop residue, we'll use those critical learnings and share it widely amongst all the stakeholders so that they can take an uniform, decision making in terms of addressing the issue of crop residue burning.
Thanks a lot, Manoj. But there will be more questions
sure
coming up. I can already see a lot of people writing. So we'll take that at the end. I think next up will be Kanika. Kanika, the floor is yours.
Thank you. That's a hard act to follow. That was very interesting, Manoj. Thanks for sharing. My presentation is going to be slightly different and going to turn things around on the head, especially for those of us in the research space. So I'm here today to talk about IDEO and how we do design research at IDEO. And design research is a highly qualitative approach and methodology to research and to developing products, programs, solutions, and systems for people. Very different from taking large sets of data and analyzing them. In this case, we're actually spending many, many hours, many days with a few people and really understanding their lives and understanding how we might impact their lives. So just wanted to set the context before we jump in. So I don't know how many of you do know of IDEO, but IDEO is a global organization, most famously known for designing the Apple mouse. And literally, it was designed out of a garage with a few people. There was an engineer, there was a student, there were different people, so multidisciplinary team who were just like hacking around a problem that someone put to them. And they discovered that we have these deodorant roll-ons, that the roll-on from the deodorant serves as a great mouse pad, and that's literally how the Apple mouse came into being. And that was the origin of our company. IDEO is really a design-led organization because we believe all products, services, systems, and programs need to be designed. And magic really happens at the intersection of these three kind of big circles. But beginning with the humans, so how do we make this desirable for the people that are going to use it? So how does it really fit into their lives? Of course, along with that, we need to understand how is it financially viable to make this possible, and how is it technologically feasible to make this possible at that price and in the way that users can access or engage with it or be impacted by it. So really magic happens at the center of these three concentric circles, and IDEO came up with the methodology of design thinking or design research, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. I specifically work on a program called Last Mile Money. We're funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And like Kamala mentioned, our work is really to connect underserved communities to the digital economy. And so what we're doing through this program is spending a lot of time with people in rural areas across India, Africa, Southeast Asia, to understand how, as they're coming online, as they're getting access to digital phones, how might they use that for more productive purposes? And so a lot of research around how digital economies and digital financial services can fit into their lives. So anyway, let's jump into what human-centered design is. So human-centered design, like I've already said, is really starting with the people. And I think Vikas mentioned this earlier, right? I think it's easy to look at numbers and tell you or make sense of the numbers. But how often do we understand why those numbers mean what they mean? And to really understand the why behind it, we need to understand who is really impacted by it and what are their feelings. So what do they say when they say something? What are they thinking? What do they feel? What are they doing? In which context do they live? So really design research and research through the human-centered design way is really understanding the why and understanding the behaviors of people. And what it really looks like is it's a three-step process. It's where in the first phase, you look for inspiration. So you go really wide. You can take analogous inspiration. So one example that's very popular is when IDEO was looking to advise a hospital on how they can increase efficiency in their operation theaters. They went and spent a day in the F1 crew pit to understand how F1 teams change and turn over cars in less than 2 seconds, right? And use those inspirations to basically design better operation theater systems so doctors, nurses, and patients can be managed better and more patients can be served within the same period of time. So you go really wide, you take inspiration from a wide amount of places, you spend a lot of time with people, then you start ideating and prototyping. So ideation and prototyping at IDEO really means you start sketching on pieces of paper, you start building things, you get really scrappy and makey, and you put that in the hands of your users and spend time with them and get feedback. And then you again put this out in the real world and start to get feedback. And so it's an iterative process, and this doesn't end at implementation. So it's a continuous process where we diverge and converge. While the previous slide looked really beautiful, what it can feel like as you're going through it is it's very overwhelming. There's a lot of information to process, and there are a lot of information about people, and so you need to be sensitive, and so it can feel very overwhelming. I just wanted to quickly point out a couple of examples of how we went from a paper prototype to something that's more real. We were working with a government organization that's trying to digitize self-help groups. And what we were really trying to do is help bookkeepers become more efficient, increase their accuracy, and create some joy in their everyday lives, and use digital to do that. But what we didn't want to do is go ahead and assume that a regular accounting app is what they would be able to use and what they would enjoy using. And so prototyping really helps us learn quickly, learn cheaply, and also helps us to fail fast. And so you can see here right on top, these were just a bunch of sketches that literally our team put together within a day. So you put these sketches and you blow them up into A4 size sheets. And then we go out into the field and we actually ask people to tell us what's happening on these sheets. And it really gives us a sense of what people are drawn towards, what people understand of what's happening on that, and gives us a lot of feedback of what they understand, and really helps us understand what their literacy levels are. And so we really spend time with women to understand how much of these digital interactions they understood just on paper. We took that feedback and then designed slightly better with more color digital screens that we then shared with them on WhatsApp, and also printed these out. And then got feedback from them. We asked them what some of these colors meant. We asked them where they might press, what button they might press on the screen. And then based on that feedback, then we went ahead and designed the product that we finally recommended to our partner. I think as you see this, you can imagine that this may take very long, but we did this entire thing within a span of 2 weeks. And we were able to move from paper to this high fidelity design because we were working so closely with the user and very instantly getting feedback. And of course, not a very large group of users. It was a small group, but representative. And we were getting some real feedback about things they wanted. They wanted to see themselves on the screen so they don't feel too disconnected. They wanted to see color, things that they associate with. And so that's what you'll see. Just another way on how to learn with prototypes. So when you put a bunch of prototypes out, with users, so I'll just walk you through an example. So this was for a credit app with small merchants in rural Pakistan. We were trying to understand if they wanted something functional, they wanted something that they can, because they manage their shops with families, they wanted something more community led, or they wanted something that was more numbers led and information oriented. So we designed these 3 kind of loan application entry points, and we asked them which they liked best. And then what typically people tend to do is if a merchant tells them, hey, I liked option B, you tend to believe that that's what they like. But I think the bigger question to find out is why do you like option B? And so then we found out that they liked option B because it included the family images and they like to take someone's approval. Typically, these small shops are run by families and they need to take approval before taking a loan. And then when we asked them why their father specifically, it's because their father is a senior member and otherwise they were borrowing from their father. And so it really helped us understand this person and their need more than just understanding what they like. And so really our synthesis at the end of that was they need quick access to loans with flexible payback, similar to how they would just borrow from their father. And that and so then the next prototype was less about sharing information with their parent, but more about how do we create more flexibility in their payment? So this is about design research. It was very short, so I couldn't cover everything, but I'm happy to answer questions. Also, in this deck, there are a bunch of resources, which I think I've shared with Rashi, and she can share with all of you.
I think you've sort of stepped on a hornet's nest. There's going to be a lot of questions coming in. I think people have got quite excited. Just like to start off by asking you two questions of my own. Number one is in a domain. Uh, I'm talking about the development sector in a research domain which has been over so many years almost completely dominated by numbers and large scale surveys. And not only the researchers here, it is being driven by the thought process was often driven by donors who give the money to run projects, in the sense that the people that they respond to in terms of their spending of public money requires numbers to justify things. So what is the value that qualitative research really brings in the development sector? That is my first question. And the second question is that, do you have any examples where quali and quanti design has gone hand in hand and worked together to deliver a project?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Sandeep. I think the big value add for qualitative research, or research that really is more focused on the last mile consumer, is understanding the why, right? And unless you understand the why, it's hard to scale, because you might get some early traction in a product based on some data and numbers, but unless you're actually solving a real problem of a user, or unless you're really fixing a system by understanding the root cause, you're never going to be able to entirely fix the system. And so, in my opinion, the most important value add that qualitative research or design research, where you spend time with users, is to really understand the why. And once you know the why, you're not an idea in search of a problem. You have a problem and you're designing your idea around a problem, right? And so the solution then is that much more robust, that much more sustainable over a longer period of time. And no discounting the fact that data has a role to play, and I think it's complementary. And so a lot of validation, I believe, happens through data. So I see a lot of importance for qualitative approaches in the early days, when you have an idea, when you have a concept, when you want to quickly go and test and validate. I think that's where a lot of qualitative research comes in. But if you want to really understand true impact on people over a long period of time, or you want to understand if the needle has actually moved, I think there's a role for hard data, for data analytics. And so I see that's how they kind of play a role. In the early stages, you want to find product market fit, you want to design a right program for the real problem, and that's when you want to spend more time and understand the context. And then when you want to actually measure the impact, that's when you bring more hard data.
Rashi has an amazing question. I think this is very interesting. She asks that, I'm curious to know how one balances the creative task of prototyping while also taking care of project timelines. Where does one draw the task, draw the line?
To be honest, I think there's a misconception that qualitative research can take very long. Like I said, I think we went in this particular solution, we went from this to this within a span of 2 weeks. And so it's very possible to move quickly and to align with timelines. I think what is important, however, is to make sure that all your stakeholders who are involved trust the process. It is a very ambiguous process, and it can feel like it is unnecessary, a lot of things that happen in qualitative research. So I think there's an element of trusting the process, but there is it's easily possible to bring like agility and speed, and you can move very quickly. So we have 1 week design sprints where we go from problem to some early level of solutioning.
Okay. One more question for you. This is from Anubrata. She wants to know, did you also create empathy maps and use personas in the process?
That's right, Anubrata. If I had time, I would have spent a little bit more time on that. So the first step is always to create a user journey map and then place your different types of users across those journeys and understand how they respond, what are their pain points and what are their needs in those moments. And that's really how you create user personas. So that's actually the crux of a lot of it. Spending time and understanding the user at the start, and then you move to solutioning and prototyping.
So now we've got a set of questions from somebody who I know is a very staunch quantitative researcher, but I'd like to think that she keeps an open mind about everything. The two questions are very pertinent, and for somebody who I mean who has worked a lot in the quantitative side of the business, I see it quite relevant in the sense that the why could be quite different for different people, right? So I mean, how do you ensure that your design suits that you come up with, fits the universe or is scalable to, or can be scaled up to fit the universe? That's the first question. Number two is that what sort of validation is required post qualitative before scaling up? I mean, does it necessarily mean you have to have a quantitative exercise done?
I think in design research, just going back to Anubrata's question, we create user personas at the start. And typically, Manmeet, what we'll do is we pick users at the edges of your bell curve. And we believe that if you design for your edge cases, you will most likely have designed for the larger universe. Having said that, it is a iterative process, and you iterate as you understand the universe better, and you iterate on your user journeys as you identify more user personas. But to quickly answer your question, I think we define user personas, and then we will typically try and pick edge cases on both ends and design for them, and hope that then it works for others. Uh, in terms of the next question, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there is a role for data. Having said that, I don't think it's always necessary. I think it depends on which stage you are at and what kind of argument you're trying to make. In many cases, just qualitative data is good enough to make a case to go forward and design a product. But like I said, if you're trying to really understand impact, you're trying to understand if the product has moved a needle over a slightly longer period of time, then you typically will back it with quantitative data. So I think there's a role for both to play, and they're complementary.
That's great, Kanika. Thanks. As I said to Manoj before, be prepared for some more questions to come in towards the end. I think it's generated a lot of thought among the audience. So, Chandana, you're up next. I'm leaving the floor to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and it's a pleasure to be able to participate in this discussion and in this forum. And I'll be happy, and I'll try my best to answer whatever questions if you have any. So coming quickly to the, I mean, after hearing Kanika and after hearing the, the first one, which was very interesting actually, the presentations, my objective today in this short talk would be to give you a little bit of sense of the, the different tech-based or the digital-based methodologies that one has used to reach out to consumers in an age where we are sitting literally in the middle of the tech revolution. So as we all know, and I mean, we encounter it in our daily lives as well, is that, I mean, the pace at which the access and the usage and the exposure that has gone up to, say, the internet, or to, say, data per se, or even to smartphones, for the general public, even in a country like India, has been phenomenal. Particularly in the last, say, 4-5 years, the pace has been much more, as we all know. And it's now no longer, none of these tech-based platforms are anymore sort of concentrated only amongst the urban rich or the urban cream of the society. It's now percolated across town classes, across geographies, and gone down literally to the end of, I mean, the smallest town, or even the semi-urban and rural areas as well. So given that, it's very, very pertinent and it's very important to understand whether one can use technology-based solutions or technology-based methodologies to reach out and elicit the data that we want from consumers, whether quantitatively or qualitatively. It actually doesn't matter, because in both, if we can use, it just adds to the the richness and to the layers of the data, and therefore allow us to do hopefully richer analysis of what we get out of them. So given this context, uh, I mean, I'll just try to give you a very short snippet of a few tech-based solutions that one has used, and the experience that has been, or in what areas, or in what sort of fields is it sort of applicable. So so one of them, and I'm calling it behavior audit. Now I don't know whether the name is the right one, but essentially what we've done in this kind of context across projects actually is that it's nothing but a passive monitoring of behavior of consumers. So when I'm saying passive monitoring, as the name suggests, it's not a direct question answer thing, not using any sort of digital or otherwise framework, but it is basically either, if it's an offline kind of a context where you want to do this passive monitoring, it is actually using different devices, for example video cameras, and there could be many other scanners, etc., whatever. It depends on what you want to monitor, but essentially using through these devices, you are basically monitoring what is happening in, let's say, shop floor, or at the entrance of a mall, or any such place where you want to sort of understand a consumer behavior, or two consumers interacting between themselves, or even a retailer and a consumer interacting, observing and stuff like that. And this is also very unobtrusive, as the name suggests. It's a passive monitoring, so therefore you are not dependent on the claims of the consumers, rather you are going more by the actual behavior. So for example, even in an online context, it has been used, and used very successfully, where, for example, let's say I am scrolling down and I'm surfing, let's say, the Amazon app to find, say, a 42-inch television for myself. Now, how am I scrolling? What kind of search method I'm using? Am I directly going to the TV page, and there also specifically I have brands, etc., in mind, and I'm just typing it out to cut down on my time, and therefore directly going to, let's say, a specific model of Sony TV? Or is it that I'm surfing through different types of TVs, different screen sizes, etc., reading reviews, spending time comparing, etc., and then only arriving at finally, if there is anything that I like for me to pick up? I could even just be doing a research and not finally picking up anything. So all of these behavioral traits, I don't need to ask questions at every stage to the consumers to be able to capture this. Rather, it's for me to just monitor this through, let's say, a very simple app that is placed either in the respondent's phone, if this is being done through the smartphone, and I just monitor what he or she is doing, of course, without getting into unnecessary confidential information, but just the general search path. And then based on that, depending on the hypothesis, etc., that I form based on this actual behavior, I could even have some very small surveys put in, where you can ask one or two direct questions if at all needed. And essentially, through this, you are getting a much richer type of data from the consumers, instead of just relying on what he or she would have wanted you to believe. So both in an offline or an online context, this is very useful. Similarly, another methodology that we've used, and it is actually used nowadays relatively in a common manner, I would say, is what I'm calling it, the eye or the retinal movement tracking. So as the name suggests, it's basically, again, it's also in a way a passive monitoring, but very specifically focused on the eye movement. And this is therefore typically used in contexts where you want to show, let's say, a small short video to the consumer, or you want to show some advertising or any other external stimulus to him or her, and wanting to understand which part of the video or which part of the stimulus arrests his attention. Where is it that he spends the maximum amount of time? Where is it that he just skims through and doesn't even bother to spend any time? And so on and so forth. Similarly, let's say on the shop floor, particularly in modern format outlets where you actually have self-service, and therefore it's up to the consumer to scroll around the outlet to see where all he or she wants to spend more time, more pick up stuff, read stuff, where he just wants to breeze through, and so on and so forth. Again, an eye tracking could be a very, very useful one there, where we figure out which kinds of brands, which kinds of packaging formats, which kind of SKUs attract his attention, his or her attention much more, and where therefore he or she ends up spending much more time. And therefore the tracking becomes, and then when you analyze the tracking pattern at the back end is when you realize, I mean, you automatically derive a lot of these kinds of rich insights without getting into unnecessary questions and making him irritated, if at all. And then based on that, again, one could have, depending on your purpose, you could follow it up with some, very few primary surveys, maybe exit interviews if it's in the shop floor, and so on and so forth. But sometimes you don't even need that as well, because this itself, the behavior itself, gives rise to a lot of hypotheses, rich hypotheses that you can form and analyze, and maybe therefore derive some solutions, if needed, validated through other researchers. So eye tracking is something that is becoming more and more popular today. And finally, in the context of paucity of time, I'll just spend 2 minutes on app-based researches. I think this is one of the most common ones that all of us in some form or the other are probably aware of or have encountered, either as respondents or as observers or things like that, where either we use this where we basically prepare a very, very basic customer friendly kind of a instrument. Again, it could be done qualitatively or quantitatively, but more so it's done in a quantitative manner, because apps typically are somehow used more in the quantitative context till today. So we can design a very simple, straightforward, self-completion kind of an instrument, and it can be shared with consumers. It can be shared with consumers very easily, and therefore based on that they can answer those questions, because it's self-completion. They can do it at their own pace, they can do it at whatever time suits them, and and even sensitive topics can be answered, because there's nobody hovering around and sort of poking into whatever I'm doing. So the app-based ones are very, very common. We can also even use in-app surveys, which is also nowadays becoming a bit common, and depending on the requirement, one can sort of do in-app surveys. But basically the entire purpose of this, and all these examples that I was giving, is to give a sense that tech-based solutions are here to stay, whether it is the pandemic period or a normal period. We have seen that if it's a tried and tested technology, it does give a lot of advantages. Particularly, it is very often very time effective, and also it's the quality for different reasons, like we've discussed. Some of it is also of essence here, and we actually get I mean, in most cases we get much better quality because of the unobtrusive nature of it, and the consumers are much freer and much more engaged in this. Thank you so much. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I think the main question which people want to ask you, or the people's concern, is that of ethics, in the sense that it could be very intrusive in that way. And suppose, I mean, can governments actually use it, or who is regulating it? I mean, is it an informed consent that goes through an IRB? So, how do you take care of these ethical considerations for doing something like this? And I have a question separately: is that where do you install this? I mean, is it installed on the screen of your phone or your computer, or is it something in your spectacles? I mean, I don't know where do you install something like this?
So I'll first take, I think, the first question, that ethical one, and then I'll come to yours. So yes, it's a very, very relevant question, and particularly in today's context with PII and stuff becoming so critical, GDPR becoming so much more critical, and very soon coming to India and being applicable here. Yes, a lot of these, not all maybe, but a lot of these. So for example, the passive monitoring, because it's passive, so the respondent may or may not be able to get a sense that this is being monitored. Now typically the The passive monitoring is done or have been done till now more for longitudinal data and therefore across, in panel kind of context where you have recruited people already to form a part of the panel. So at that time itself, it's very clearly communicated to them. In fact, they are even any concerns if they have at that time, it's being answered. So basically they are told that, this app that they have to download. So they have to download the app, which is the online context. And they are told that the only thing that this app does is to just monitor which apps in your phone you are using. We are not getting into any financial information there. So even if you are using, let's say, an Amazon, and even if you are buying something, we just get to know, and we sort of monitor it from the background and get to know what is it that you are interested in and how you are going about the search process. But and this ends with the add to cart. After that, it doesn't move beyond. So even if you've added something to the cart, it doesn't necessarily mean that you would have bought it. And even if you have bought it, what else did you do? Which one or did you buy and which one you did not, and how much you paid for it, and your payment methods and all kinds of confidential information. There is no way that we can track that because the app itself only stops at the add to cart, for example. So, but this is also told to them right at the beginning when they are recruited, and only once they have given their consent is when they are recruited to the panel. And typically, like I said, this passive monitoring is typically done in the panel context. But even if it's not, so for example, let's say in an offline store where we are, sort of we install a camera. Now the camera could be, I mean, again, to answer in a way, Sandeep, your question as well, along with this, is that depending on what you are monitoring or what you are capturing, you decide what kind of place do you choose to install it. So for example, if it's a video camera that you need to install in a to understand a retailer and a consumer interaction, so to say, the quality of interaction and what the consumer is looking for, you typically do it in the shop, at the, if it's a small shop, let's say, or a small grocery or something, you do it at the roof of the shop in a certain place after taking the retailer's permission. So it's the retailer's shop. The retailer has been recruited in a way, it's not exactly a panel, but the retailer has been recruited as a respondent in this case, and he or she knows that any conversation that he has about any of these categories that he has with any of his consumers, that's being recorded. But there is no confidential information in any case that is being talked about here. It's just primarily to understand whether the retailer is pushing any brand, whether the retailer is just going exactly by what the consumer is asking for. How is it that the consumer is referring to my category or my brand or my SKU? So a whole host of these kinds of things for which you just, I mean, there's no PII related information. However, if there is any, then like I said, everywhere it's very clear that unless and until the consumer knows what is being talked about and is sensitive enough and has given the permission, is when we do it.
Okay,
just
there are
one
some
more minute,
yeah,
Sandeep says. No, so the eye tracking bit, because you spoke about how where is it installed and stuff like that. Typically, till now at least, the eye tracking mechanism and the device, it's typically done or used through a, I mean, for want of a better word, it's a glass, it's spectacles actually. Your dark glasses, slightly dark glasses, not very dark. So not like your typical sunglasses, but slightly darker than your normal glasses. And all that the respondent is required to do in, say, let's say if I'm doing it in a shopping context, that he or she has to agree to wear it while he spends time inside the shop. That's it. It doesn't impair his vision. He can do anything that he wants to do like he normally would have done. But because of the fact that he's wearing it, it captures. And he's also told that through this, all that we'll capture is this, where he spends time, and he's not even coached to do anything about he should do this or he should do that. He's expected to behave in a very normal manner.
Yeah, there are linked questions to this, which has been asked by Abhishek, and a very interesting question that has been asked by Karan. But we have run out of time, so I'm going to ask these questions when we go back to the plenary. Yes? Sure. Right. Yep. So, oh, great. So now the time, now I guess it's my presentation. I have a very short presentation. We wanted to take everybody through something what we are doing at Sambodhi panels. Sambodhi panel, as the name suggests, is is a panel. It's a representative panel across urban and rural India, and we run quick telephonic surveys using these panels or part of the panels. And this is a work which is relatively new. It has started, but I'll be very thrilled. I'm actually very thrilled to be sharing it with all of you. So bear with me. It's a very short presentation, but it's an idea just to give you a flavor of what we're doing here in Sambodhi as far as panel work is concerned. But first off, let's be very clear. Panels are very useful for perception mapping, right? Whether it's a single point cross-sectional data you're looking for or longitudinal data, they're very, very good if you want to look at what a perception mapping of people. However, it is not a very good method if you're looking at critical estimates of behavior or outcomes. Say, let's say health in the health domain. It is never going to go and measure health-seeking behavior for you or give some values of vital statistics for you. Panels cannot be used for that. They can give you a feel of the ground truth, and that is sometimes that is all that is required, is what the ground truthing is all about. But necessarily is not a good tool to arrive at certain benchmark values, which you essentially want to go and compare it with, say, given estimates of NFHS or SRS or things like that. So what have we done here? I'm going to just draw some examples of what we have done in Sambodhi panels. We have an urban domain and a rural domain. Urban domain, just to make it representative, we have drawn samples which are by town classes. We have separate samples for super metros, metros, and class 1 towns. We have got separate samples for the younger age group and the older age group. We have got separate samples for gender. Occupations, there are 10 primary occupations that has been taken, and they have been broken up into 3 broad categories, which is equivalent to high, medium, and low income groups. Very similar in rural areas. Again, an age and gender classification. There are 13 occupation categories, again broken up into 3 groups. But in terms of villages, the development scenario in a Gram Panchayat village is likely to be much more than all the other constituent villages around it. So we have separated with the Gram Panchayat village vis-a-vis the other villages. So this is the profile for which we have actually created our panel to ensure some sort of representativeness on the ground. Then we have built it absolutely from scratch. I mean, we have procured numbers from, Sambodhi has been doing studies, so many large studies. So we have procured numbers through consent on past studies. We have procured numbers which are available commercially. Numbers can be, you get phone calls all the time. Then you screen the numbers for DND, which is the do not disturb thing that they have with their providers. After seeking consent, you essentially seek consent whether they want to be part of a panel or they want to be interviewed or not. And then once you're impaneled, you impanel them as per the profile variables which we just listed in the last slide, and then you decide on we have decided on a incentivization plan. The longitudinal tracks. Now, you want to do one-off studies as well, but you want to do longitudinal tracks as well, because at the end of the day, you want to create some sort of indices which you want to track over, which you want to track over time and see how it changes. We are already looking at indices like a consumer sentiment index, like a dietary diversity index and things like that. So one of the things the longitudinal tracks necessitate is that they necessarily have to have the same set of respondents participating over time. But then that's a problem because the Hawthorne effect sets in. I don't want to talk about the Hawthorne effect. I think all of you are researchers, so you know how people, if they're continuously the same bunch of guys are interviewed, they start giving you practice answers. They tell you what you want to feel, want to hear. They tell you something which they feel that you're going to be happy hearing. It's not actually the truth which is coming out in their response. Hence, it's very important that you change the panel composition from time to time. Now, there are 2 major methods to do it. Number 1 is that you can change about 25% of the panel every year. So every 5th year, you get a fresh panel, which is fine, which works really well on retail tracks. In most of, let's say, the Nielsen's retail track or any other retail track done all over the world, they use this 25% rule to get a fresh panel every 5th year. But if you have surveys which you're doing which require a high amount of contact with high frequency, like for example monthly contacts, then even if you change 25%, the balance number of people among the balance number of people who are in your panel who you're not changing, the Hawthorne effect is likely to set in. So to circumvent on that, you have to have really, really large sample sizes, which sort of belies the concept of having a panel in the first place. So there is a second method of doing this as well. And this is something which we are following here in Sambodhi, in the sense that, as I said, we create different baskets of profile baskets made in terms of age, gender, occupation, location, and so on and so forth. So you have about 10, 12 different baskets. We try and recruit people for the panels which basket wise adequate number of people within each basket, and for every survey we randomly choose people to respond to from within each basket, so that you have to have a fairly sizable size in the size of people in each basket. But what it helps you do is that it helps you avoid the Hawthorne effect, and it also helps you avoid certain unnecessary jerks in the curve. Like, for example, um, uh, if you've suddenly changed the entire panel, then you have a curve which was going like this, and suddenly it can start going like this. And especially if you're doing an index, that's a very, very big problem, because in index you cannot see jerks in the curve between 1 month to another month, just because you've changed the panel. So this is one of the things which we are doing. One of the things going forward, what we have right now is a fairly sizable panel already. We've got 8,200 urban households already empaneled, and about 7,200 rural households. 20 states, actually it's urban and rural panel. We're covering 18 states in urban areas, 20 states in rural areas, almost 3 per zone. We have got 6 zones in India. The urban panel especially has 31 cities, which is covered of different sizes. We aim to reach somewhere around 25,000 to 30,000 by the end of the year. Right now we have about 15,000, 16,000. A lot of the work has already been done. We have finished a retirement survey already, which is getting a lot of traction in the press. You can see articles which has been published in Financial Express, and the Mint article came out today. And the two other indices which we are working on right now using the panel is a consumer sentiment survey. We are going to be following the University of Michigan methodology, where they have been using that methodology to do the consumer sentiment survey since 1972. We are going to use that, start using that here in India, and we do a dietary diversity survey, or we call it the food plate survey, both of it which we should be out by end of June or early July. Thank you. So Abhishek asks, does participation in the panel surveys also lead to a behavioral change? I think what could be done to segregate the influence while attributing impacts of the concerned intervention. I think a lot of that has to do with the Hawthorne effect, which I was talking about, in the sense that it's if they know they are part of the panel, and you're saying that these retinal tracks are good in terms of longitudinal studies. How do you take care of the fact that the Hawthorne effect does not set in?
Passive monitoring that I spoke about.
Okay.
That is primarily, at least till now, has been used more for longitudinal studies, and therefore you take the permission right at the beginning. However, there is no rule that the eye tracking cannot be used for longitudinal studies. But to the best of my knowledge, till now, at least, the different kinds of studies and experiments that have been done with eye tracking methodology, I think in more instances it has been done for one-time studies, but one can devise it, and it can evolve very well and be used for longitudinal studies also if required, because there is an utility for that as well.
But how would you ensure the fact that if they know they're part of the panel, their behavior is certain, somewhat sort of conditioned?
See, you ensure because let's say, let me take the example of a shopper context, okay, where the eye tracking is used. Now, all that the respondent is told before he or she enters the shop is that we just want to understand how you go about in this shop for your normal purchase, whatever you've come for. In fact, typically there would be maybe a 2-3 question kind of a survey at the beginning to get a sense from him or her, what has he come to buy today? Is it necessities? Is it just, 1 or 2 things, and the rest she just wants to lodge around and see if there is anything of interest and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get that sense, accordingly you tell him or her that we just want to, the path that he or she takes in the store, or where all he stops, what all he wants to pick up or does not want to pick up. We just want to get a broad sense of that. So primarily at whichever level, we try not to give him any ideas from our side in terms of,
probing on this is my category of interest, or this is my brand of interest, or this is what I want to capture, this is competition for me, and so on and so forth. Yes, at times, again, depending on where you sort of use it, you may have to be slightly more specific. But for eye tracking, particularly since it's a movable device, which he or she wears it only, and that's all. You don't even need a fixed space where you fix it for. So actually, it doesn't matter. You can give a very general this thing, and he's just told that you do whatever you want to. Now, initially, yes, I agree. He may be conscious, but believe me, after a certain point, he actually forgets it because she's come for a very particular reason.
There is a question by Karan, and very specific question. Just like eye tracking, is there is there any methodology or any module that does facial expression tracking as well?
So as a part of that may not be, but yes, definitely this is something that is also used. See, I had just picked up these 2-3 as examples because of paucity
So there
of
are
time.
softwares which are available.
Yes, yes, very much. Facial expression tracking. In fact, you could even have cameras focusing at, I mean, of course, it's a very experimental design, and where a lot of, prime introduction has to be given to the consumer to make him feel comfortable and all that. But once it's done, and I know some big e-com players do it. So it's there, one of their protocols where you fix a camera in front of yourself. So let's say you're sitting at a chair and a table is in front of you. So on the table, focusing towards my face, there is this camera. So he or she is very clearly told, and there's nothing hidden. As in, he can see that it's being, his whatever he's talking about or whatever he's doing on his screen, it is being photographed, monitored, etc. So, I mean, it doesn't work in every single situation, but this is something that is definitely have started getting traction, and for different purposes, it has started being used. Even double cameras sometimes. So one camera focusing on your keyboard to figure out what you were doing with in that e-com space or whatever, and the second camera focusing at your face. And when you do the analysis, you do the analysis of both of them together in the background to be able to gain meaningful insights.
Before we do closing remarks, we just have 1 minute, and there is a question for Kanika. How do you deal with edge cases in the UX research process?
It's similar to how we deal with it when we're doing research to understand what works for them. So let's say we want to go out and really understand if a rural low income user who is not textually or numerically literate needs to understand how a user experience works. There are platforms like Maze, where you can essentially build a clickable prototype, and then you take that clickable prototype and you actually sit next to them and see how they navigate it. And so it's MAZE. You can put in your prototype into that, and so then it's more clickable. It's not a paper that they have to read. We also have and I'm taking an edge case where a user can't read or write. So it's typically the same process, because a lot of design research is for edge cases, because we want to design for them and then expect it to work for everyone else.
On behalf of Sambodhi, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I mean, this has been an excellent interaction. I'm so glad that you guys took time off your busy schedules and joined us to make this a success. Just a few closing remarks. I mean, I think there's still a lot of questions that are probably unanswered, but we'll try and get these answers for you by offline, sending them to you so that you can answer to them as you can. One of the things, or a couple of things I just wanted to say as a closure argument is that, there are, first of all, there are no methodologies which are market research and social research. There are research methodologies, right? Whether you use it in development sector or use it only in consumer sector, I think they transcend the borderline very easily. It depends on whether you're open enough to be using different techniques borrowed from different walks of life. Number one. Number two is that, look, I've been around in this sector for about 30 years. That's 3 decades. I feel old, believe me, for 30 years. But the first 20 years of my life, I have seen in the development sector research being limited only to generating numbers. It's been a purely numbers game. There was hardly any qualitative research which is going on. And we were all saying that, I mean, that the client wants it, so that's it. I mean, there will be statisticians and demographers and so on and so forth, which is going to be dominating this landscape. Over the last 10 years, I think things have changed, and the clients themselves have changed. And I think the more amount of RFPs which are coming out on pure qualitative research right now is more than it's ever been in the past right now. So even if you have this argument right now that, okay, fine, there are such exciting models that are coming up, but your usage of these models are going to depend on what your client wants, because most of the time the client will define the tool that they want you to use. I would like to say one thing, and this is something which works. Don't be reactive all the time to what the client is saying. Even if you're not doing a project for the client, be proactive with these clients, give them certain ideas. If you're a model that you want to test out, try and convince the client to try out certain things. And you never know, I mean, there will be a situation where they may be open to newer techniques coming in. They might not even known about it, but they've come to know about it for the first time from you. So I think that's the spirit that we have to go forward. There is a large number of techniques which were never being used 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. They are all available right now. There are experts here willing to share their ideas. We just have to pick them up, fit them to the type of research which we do, and go out there and try and convince some clients to be bold enough to try a few of them in the upcoming RFPs. So with that, I would like to close this by handing it over to Kamila for a vote of thanks.
Thanks so much, Sandeep. With that, I guess we're ready to close. Thank you to our audience and for your very compelling questions. This has been a very fantastic last hour and a half, and I'm personally leaving with a lot of food for thought. And I'm sure I speak for everyone else here as well. I'd like to first thank our amazing panel of speakers. Kanika, Chandana, Manoj, a big thank you for agreeing to join us today. This has been absolutely enlightening. And I'm so happy that you could make this happen for us and be here today and take out time from your schedules for this. Thank you so much. Sandeep, a big thank you to you for moderating and doing such an amazing job. Really super grateful. Finally, I'd like to thank our amazing communications team, our planning team, Anubrata, Rashi, Ankita, Yashika, Tarun. Thank you so much. Your efforts have made Data Conclave a reality. A big thank you to Vikas for your opening remarks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much always for your support and for backing all of our efforts. Super grateful. And finally, I'd like to thank our audience for taking the time to attend, for all their amazing questions, and for helping us move this conversation on data and technology in the development sector forward. We look forward to your engagement on our social media to push this conversation forward even more. And we look forward to connecting there. We also hope that you join us tomorrow for our third and final day at the Data Conclave. We have a session on data storytelling, which I'm sure everyone at Sambodhi is really looking forward to. So yeah, thank you so much, and we hope to see you soon.